everybody. Welcome back to Reclaim You. This week, Abby is here, and we are talking all about overfunctioning.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm excited to talk about this. I think we both came in to today like recognizing some of our own overfunctioning or kind of running on high speed, settling
Sure
into this
did.
moment.
Sure did. We were both kind of like prepared, putting things together, and then we were kind of like, oh, right, this is what we're doing with a little exhale and putting things down and aside. Totally.
Yeah, I physically had to put my notes aside
Uh-huh.
because I can just be here and chat
Mhm.
about my thoughts. So that can be
Yeah.
enough.
Oh, that is enough, right? Like permission to slow down. It can be so challenging and so important.
Yeah,
Yeah.
something I've been, reflecting on and working on personally for a long time. And I think it is sort of like an ongoing reflection and practice of slowing down and
Oh, yeah.
letting myself be instead of like doing. So,
Yeah, it's like layer by layer. There can be a lot of layers, right, in slowing down, and it's just like
mhm.
slowly peeling back those layers as you're ready. But yeah, I'm excited to kind of dive into it. Where should we start in all of this? What's calling you?
Yeah, I think just maybe starting with, we said that the topic is over functioning and perhaps just like exploring what that means for us
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
putting our own sort of definition on the term overfunctioning. For me, it really is this urge of, just like I said, doing, getting things done, checking boxes on our to-do list versus just being with what
Mhm.
is. So kind of like that tendency or that urge to go, do, get things done. The function likely being, okay, this is making me feel very contained, in control, like safe, because there's something to do, there's something to check off. So it's a really simple personal definition of overfunctioning for me. I don't know if that
Mhm.
also lands for you, if there's other aspects of
Yeah.
overfunctioning that are coming to mind.
Yeah, that definitely lands for me. And I was just thinking about how, for a long time in my life, I probably wouldn't have considered myself over functioning or overworking or, going, because it felt so normal of just like, this is just what you do, right? Like it was this pattern that I probably started engaging in a really young age that just kind of carried through. And nothing penetrated it for a really long time until the burnout started to set in. So it feels like to me, and how it's showed up for me in my life is noticing when I'm just like revved and thinking and doing and going and going and going. And like you said, not making space to feel into like what's here in the present moment. And I think
Mhm.
there's lots of reasons why we wouldn't want to feel into what's here in the present moment, because feeling can be really scary. Kind of like we talked about with Casey last week or a couple of weeks ago, of it often feels really bad before it starts to feel tolerable or normal or anything like that. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know if a lot of people can relate to that, like not even realizing they're overfunctioning because it just feels like what you do, what's normal, what's expected, what gets you through the day.
Yeah, yeah, it's so normalized and we see it everywhere. I hear like people self-identify as workaholics or
Mm-hmm.
um, the emails never stop coming in, or even, saying things like, well, if I'm not super busy all the time, if I don't have all these things on my calendar, even outside of like a traditional work day or school
Mm-hmm.
day or what have you, if I'm not booked, then I'm going to be thinking about a lot of things and I don't want to go there. Like I don't want to be in my
Yeah.
mind. I don't want to be in
Mm-hmm.
my feelings. That's too much. So it's so
Yeah.
much nicer. It feels so much nicer sometimes to be really
Mm-hmm.
booked.
Yeah.
Yeah, to go along with the definitions that I don't know, we're coming up with. I'm just thinking of like things that I've said, heard, that maybe align with that overfunctioning label, tendency, whatever you want to call it. Or that even like I think I've said it before too. If I'm not gonna do it, who will? Just kind of
Right. Right.
it's gotta
Or if
be me
someone
to come
else
through.
does it, it won't be good enough. Like it won't be the way that I'm going to do it. So I might as well just do it. Right. It can show
Mm,
up in that way too. And what
yeah.
you shared, a light bulb kind of came off in my mind. I remember when I was I left an agency. This is earlier in my career. I left an agency where there was a lot of like expectation to work all the time. It was just the culture there of like you're on call all the time. You're expected to like say how high when someone said jump. Like it was that kind of place. And I remember shifting to a different agency where the expectations were like pretty low. Like the
Mm.
bar was pretty low. And I remember the hardest part for me was not having so much stuff to occupy my thoughts and getting to know like what that narrative was up there, because I don't think I was even aware of it for so long that I was just going, 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 going. And it was so uncomfortable. So
Mm.
uncomfortable. It was probably the hardest. And one of the most important things I've ever done is like just learning how to be with myself and driving house to house, doing home visits, things like that. There's a lot of space for that.
Yeah. Yeah, there's like so much discomfort in slowing down and being with yourself, as you mentioned. And I'm also imagining the guilt that might show up
Mm-hmm.
when you slow down, like when you take a different route. So it's not just so much more space to be with yourself, but then the messages we receive or kind of internalize over time that I need to be doing, I need to be going, I
Yeah.
need to have a packed full schedule with
Mm-hmm.
very little downtime to be productive and worthy for me, for sure. And I've heard other people talk about the guilt that comes up with, my day
Mm-hmm.
looks a little bit lighter, or I
Uh-huh.
have more time and space in my calendar. And that's scary for a lot of reasons. And I feel like this shouldn't be the way. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
need to be doing more, because if I'm not doing, then what? What does
Mm.
that say about me? You know,
Yeah.
so much like guilt, unworthiness.
Yeah. Absolutely. It taps into lots of those, negative self beliefs that can be formed at a really young age of like you have to be proving or striving or pleasing or whatever it is enough, and then maybe you can believe it too. But the problem is that you're functioning, you're working so hard that like it's never good enough, right? Like there's always more. There's always more to do, more emails to go through, more blogs to write, whatever it is, there's always going to be more. So it's like the target keeps moving.
Yeah, it ties so much into other podcasts and topics we've discussed. I'm thinking about, people pleasing. I'm
Mm.
thinking about the podcast you did with Casey last week on, like you said earlier, it gets perhaps worse before it gets better. The other one that you talked about, sort of like work,
Yeah, the toxic workplaces. Yeah.
toxic places. So it really just connects to so many other topics we've talked about,
Hmm.
the overfunctioning and how it shows up.
I'm curious, before we were recording, you had mentioned.
It feels so connected to me, like parallel to me. And so if we think about overfunctioning as this idea that I need to be doing in order to feel better, I need to be doing in order to be worthy, I need to be checking off boxes, accomplishing, I need to be productive. And you draw the connection between that and diet culture. There's a lot of similar flavors. Like diet culture kind
Mm.
of promises, if you do XYZ, you will then be worthy. You will be, you're setting goals, you're accomplishing them, you're doing. Like diet culture is very much about
Mm.
doing versus being. You're either
Mm.
doing some diet or some form of exercise, or whatever it is to achieve or accomplish some kind of goal. And then sort of again, if you divest from that, the guilt that comes in, like I'm not doing anymore, I'm not
Mm.
working towards anything. Who am I? What do I stand for, if not for like
Mm.
filling my calendar or adhering to these food rules, these
Yeah.
exercise rules? And then another parallel that I'm thinking about is how much our culture impacts both of those things. So obviously culture is within the phrase diet culture. A lot of these are messages from outside of us that we need to be eating a certain way, moving a certain way, looking a certain way to be worthy and to be lovable. Similarly with overfunctioning, like we're taught that message from a really early age. Hustle culture, just sort of
Hmm.
capitalism really driving home this point that to be worthy and to be, yeah, lovable, maybe even too,
Mm.
you have
Yeah.
to be productive. You have to be making a lot of money. You have to be really scheduled out. If you're in school, you have to be doing 10 different extracurricular activities.
Yeah.
You know, getting really high grade, like doing all of those things. I'm thinking too in college culture about like it's really pedestalized or like put on a
Mhm.
pedestal, this when people are just like really exhausted and having no time for themselves. There's that's kind of praised in some ways.
Yeah.
So it's kind
Yeah.
of like the culture sending
Mhm.
the message that this is important to do.
Yeah, and I was thinking as you were sharing about like this idea of belonging and how the overfunctioning, whether it's in, diet culture and being, enough, good enough, healthy enough, fit enough, it brings this sense of if I do this thing, maybe I'll belong. If I prove to my employer that I can handle all of the stuff. Maybe they'll see me. Maybe I'll
Mm,
belong. That it was just kind of coming up for me, so I thought I'd name it because it's interesting to think about like if the barometer for belonging or enoughness is constantly that external source, again, like we're never going to get there, right? The target is
mhm,
always going to be moving. So it feels like
mhm,
just this like cycle of disappointment and then working harder and dieting more or working longer, doing more on the weekends, whatever it is, and you never actually get a chance to rest. And then rest, even then, becomes even more uncomfortable because you're stuck in the cycle.
yeah, it really feels like at the core of both of them, the overfunctioning, the hustle culture, diet
Hmm.
culture, is this desire to belong, this, need, not even desire, need to belong.
Hmm.
And also at the core, I'm thinking it just, yeah, popped into my mind. Maybe not at the core, but like maybe a part of both of those categories, diet culture and overfunctioning, is not really like having to feel the intense uncomfortable emotions. So the intense uncomfortable emotions associated with the possibility, like what if I don't belong? There's a lot of discomfort and uncertainty when we're not doing and super scheduled. There's a lot of discomfort and uncertainty in divesting from diet culture. We then sort of take away those promises of like, if this, then that. If I'm
Right.
fully scheduled and I'm working all the time, then success and productivity and worthiness. If I am on this exercise schedule and eating this certain way and weighing this amount, looking this way, then that gets sort of taken away. And then we're left with, what am I feeling? How am I
Mm-hmm.
experiencing this moment? And that's really can be a really scary place, especially if we haven't touched in to ourselves in that way in a long time.
Yeah. Even like, who am I? Right. I think that's a big question of like, without all of this stuff, when all of the like shit falls away and I'm just here with myself, like, who am I even anymore after all of these years of hustling and grinding and striving and working? Like, what's left? What's here?
Yeah, it's a way to really, and this is not a bad thing, right? Like it serves a really important function.
Hmm.
It helps keep us, it allows us to feel like safe and grounded in some ways when we are over functioning, going. It takes a lot of time to work to slow down, and it takes a lot of time to build the tolerance for slowing down even just a little bit, and it takes some time to build tolerance for that sort of uncertainty and the discomfort to be there. So I'm just thinking about the really important functions that overfunctioning
Yeah.
can play. We do it for a reason. It's not here for
Mhm.
no reason, and I think that
Yeah.
that is sort of that first step of like noticing it
Mhm.
and labeling, like you said, like it can go unnoticed for so long because it's so normalized and we're all, in this society that really favors over functioning.
Yeah.
So to notice it and then get curious about what function is that serving in my life.
Mhm.
For some, maybe many, it is a really helpful strategy to
Yeah.
feel grounded when everything feels so uncertain.
Yeah, definitely a strategy to manage different, states that you could be in otherwise. And
Mhm,
I mean, I certainly didn't realize that for a really, really long time. And now
mhm,
that I understand it more fully, it's like, oh, right, that makes sense. That makes sense. I was trying to manage so much with this overworking, over
mhm.
functioning, over being, whatever it is. So it all makes sense, as humans in the world.
Yeah, and it may like this may or may not be true for everyone, but I think, if we do stop and notice it within ourselves, like, oh, I think I might be over functioning in this way in my life. Like, it feels really scary for me to not have plans all weekend long, or it feels really scary for me to shut the computer at 5 p.m. if that's your work day, or what, whatever it is. Like, if you start to notice that within yourself, this feels really scary to like let myself slow down just a little bit or press pause, then we can, yeah, start to get curious what might be impacting this in me. So, of course, culturally, getting curious about like what messages have I absorbed over time. And then again, for some, maybe not all, like you can look back to sort of early childhood, family of origin, to notice,
Mm-hmm.
like, is this a dynamic that's played out in my family of origin in my early childhood? Was I someone who was like the problem solver or the fixer or the doer? And that was a really valuable role that was
Yeah.
played.
Yeah. Were you parentified, right? Like, did you only get love and praise when you were doing or achieving or, hit some milestone or goal or whatever it was? Yeah, it's interesting to look at some of the roots that this like activation in your body came from because it came
Mm,
from somewhere. Again, back to the strategy. It's all for a reason. And I think that curiosity can be really helpful of like, how has this shown up? Where has it shown up? How have I noticed these patterns in my life?
yeah. And it connects back to that people pleasing that we talked about too. If we were the achieving, the doing, like if that was praised, then we feel like, okay, this is a way to please other people in my life. And so this is the way to gain acceptance and love and belonging and,
Mm-hmm.
worthy, feeling a sense of worthiness. So it makes so much sense that that would continue in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
Add on the cultural layers, and of course we're going to fall into that tendency sometimes unknowingly. So it kind of
Yeah,
does take slowing down to notice it, which if we're over
totally.
functioning, it's really hard to slow down to
It
stop and
is. Yeah. And like the ebb and flow of it, right? Like how I can really notice when I'm being pulled towards over functioning these days, at least. That doesn't mean that I always step outside of it, right? I still over
Mhm,
function quite a bit, not as
mhm.
much as I have in the past, but like no judgment about that towards myself or towards anyone else, really. But it's interesting. It's like the more you slow down, the more you understand how it shows up, when it shows up, why it shows up, even, the more you have like flexibility to land back in yourself when it is that you're ready to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, certainly not immune to over functioning every now and again.
Every now and again, here it is. Here it
Yep,
is,
yep.
knocking on the door.
Yep, and that's the practice too of just like, yeah, sometimes I notice it, sometimes I don't. Sometimes I notice it well after the fact of like, "Whoa, that was a week." Like, that
Like,
was a week of just
whoa.
really going, 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 and, what was happening for me that week? Like, was there something lingering underneath the surface that I just wasn't feeling ready to tend to or explore, and
Yeah.
letting that be okay, and then, it's just the practice of awareness, and
Yeah.
is there a way that I can slow down today? And do I have space this week to maybe journal or what have you?
So you said journal, and I was thinking about like, right, that was actually one of the reasons we got our puppy. It's funny. I'm like putting words to it now. One of the reasons that I was like, yeah, like let's definitely get a puppy. We're ready, right? Amongst the chaos of we have toddlers too. So part of it was like, I will be forced to get up from this desk, get off the computer, stop working and take a break. That was actually one of the legit reasons to get a puppy outside of just like the adorableness of a puppy and it's fun. And it was like, yeah, I will be forced to get up and get some air, get outside, and it worked very well.
Yeah, what a nice, like, natural way to like build into your day a reason to pause. Sometimes we
Yeah.
need the reason to pause.
Mhm. Mhm.
And other times we can like give ourselves full permission. No, you can
Yep.
just pause just to pause. But I think that's really an important reminder too for me that sometimes we do need sort of that
Like external something.
additional push, yeah, to say just like pause and get outside and enjoy
Mhm.
enjoy puppy time, you
Yeah.
know?
Enjoy puppyhood as much as one can.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's such
Yeah.
a good reminder, yeah, for me to like, as you're and I guess just broadly, if you're recognizing, "Oh, I wanna slow down in some way, but I really don't know how, like, this is so hard
Mhm.
to, like, get out of this pattern or this rhythm, it's so familiar." Maybe pausing just for pausing's sake or slowing down for slowing down's sake is it feels too much right now. So are there like sort of more concrete things you can bring in to tangibly like remind yourself that You need to slow
Mhm.
down right now. You need to take a break right now.
Yeah, and I think that probably, well, it definitely changes in the different seasons of life, right? Like when things are, I know for me in my life, it's relatively chaotic with little kids and of course a puppy now and the work that we do and like just everything else. I know that I do need a lot of those external cues at times to just like, oh, settle a little bit. And in other seasons of life, it may be a bit more accessible, or it has been a bit more accessible, where it's just like the slowness feels like resonant and visceral, like in the field that I'm in. So figuring out how you can care for yourself through each season of life just feels really important, and being really compassionate and giving yourself a lot of grace through the process.
Yeah, and it makes me think about how like doing versus being, is not necessarily a bad thing. Like there's
Mhm,
definitely times that we need to like take action and not like just sit and be
mhm,
with whatever's here. Ideally, we're able to have that space to pause and check in with ourselves, but like there's plenty of moments where we actually like this is a really important part of us,
mhm,
plays a really valuable role. And so, not to get rid of it completely, but just to like really practice the discernment of, do I need this right now? Like, is this serving me right now? Or
mhm,
can I invite in a little bit more slowness? And if, yeah, there definitely may be moments where like, no, I need to take action. I need to write my to-do list. I need to plan. I need
mhm,
to like work that extra hour, whatever it is.
mhm,
Letting both be there, but really discerning what's going to serve in this
mhm.
particular moment.
Yeah. Yeah, it's making me think of like the one of the goals of trauma therapy is allowing the body to come back into its like innate capacity for pendulating into discomfort and back into regulation and ease, right? And how it's this lifelong journey, especially if you've spent decades of your life living in a mode of overfunctioning, to expect to be able to like ride the ups and the downs and to notice when you're falling into behaviors and patterns all the time may not be possible for a long time. So it's like
Mhm.
patience and slowness and grace for yourself just feel so important in this kind of work that we do.
Yeah, and it makes me think about how overfunctioning can definitely pop up in like therapy, in the therapy relationship.
Oh yeah.
And again, talking about, I'm not immune to that either. We go to therapy to relieve some suffering, to feel better. And if we have those tendencies to overfunction, to like lean more towards productivity and let's get it done, let's check the boxes on the list.
Like
Yeah, I've
I need to be
definitely been
fixed. I need to fix this. Like let's go. Let's do it.
Yeah, I've definitely personally also been in a place of like, okay, how do we take care of this? What's the
Yes.
strategy? What's the game plan? How do we get rid of this thing that I'm dealing with? How do we, just as overfunctioning can pop up in so many parts of our lives, like therapy, it certainly pops up too, wanting, and it makes so much sense. Yeah, we want to feel different. We
Yeah.
come to therapy for a reason, and it can feel really scary and hard to slow down in the therapy process.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I know in our practice, we're all like slowness is where it's at, which can be so frustrating, which I get.
Really hard, really uncomfortable, and maybe through that, that's where, like, the magic happens, maybe that's
Yeah.
where we start to even just that hour, how whatever length of time, like, in the week, that's maybe the place to allow yourself to practice slowing down if it's not possible or tolerable outside of a therapy session. And if you're not in therapy or whatever, like if like maybe that is here's like the fixer within me or the but like the solution or the strategy. But
Uh-huh.
yeah,
Uh-huh.
like if it's not tolerable all the time, where's that one place that I can practice just like slowing down a tiny bit and being with what is, and practicing like setting aside the need to know and fix and solve just to see what comes up.
Yeah.
Scary though.
Yeah. So important and so scary. Yeah.
Yeah.
What are some other ideas or thoughts do you have about folks who can identify, like, oh, yeah, I maybe fall into this pattern or this way of being? What other thoughts do you have for folks? I'm like, here we go, fixing, but like, what to do? Like,
Yeah.
headline, go to therapy. Okay,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Check.
And just to like totally name and be vulnerable and compassionate for myself, like the fixer overfunctioner within me. And maybe it's not the overfunctioner within me. It's likely the really valuable part of my overfunctioning that,
Hmm.
generally prepares for these things because again, like there's value in this part of us, it's again like the discernment of when does this serve, when does this not. So here I am looking back at my notes of like just the
I love
brain
it.
dump that I had earlier. Again, there's a time where it's helpful and a time where it's not. And so
Absolutely.
I think this is a great example of me working on this of like I set my notes aside, I allowed myself to chill and be, and
Yes.
sometimes I want to look at my notes.
Yeah, and it's okay to follow that impulse, right? It's
Yeah.
okay to follow that impulse. There's
Yeah.
safety in that impulse, right?
Yeah. And there's certainly value still too.
Mhm.
In my brain dump of this topic, I wrote things down. And we talked a lot about them already, but just like the curiosity being that first thing. Yeah, we talked a lot about these things. The curiosity, the acknowledging like how much it has served and where it no longer serves. So like
Mhm.
just what we described, discerning. And then I really did just like write down, where can I slow down? Where does it feel okay to slow down? To just start to practice that and to
Mhm.
build the tolerance for the slowness. And in doing so, like feeling the feelings in a way that feels, yeah, tolerable again. So
Mhm.
we're not going from 0 to 100, but is there any part of my day or week that I can even just like moving slower, speaking slower?
Mhm.
Like it can be that, I don't want to say simple because it's not simple, but
Mhm.
um, it doesn't have to be moving mountains. We can even
Yeah.
just play around with what would it feel like to even like slow down my speech today or
Mhm.
or
Yeah.
wait to respond to that email for maybe like 30 minutes more.
Never. Never.
Yeah.
Can't
Yeah.
possibly do that, Abby. I'm sorry.
No. No. It's really hard.
It's so hard.
So that's just like sort of the brain dump thoughts that I had. And then, wait, let's see. Here we go. I did just kind of like do some journaling writing for myself about like the therapy that we do that our like practice often focuses on, specifically related to that topic of overfunctioning coming into the therapy room, as it often does. Again, I'm right there with people who like this might be the case for.
Yeah.
And just highlighting some of like the modalities we lean on and think about, I wrote down how somatically focused we are and how that can be a really cool window into practicing, exploring
Mhm.
what slowness feels like in the body. We talked already about it, but like we do a lot of parts work. So even just getting to know that overfunctioning part of us and dialing back to what we said, like it
Yeah.
serves a function. And so if we get to know it, how can
Yeah.
we work with it in a way that actually serves us? And we talked about sort of early childhood, family of origin stuff. So, we do EMDR and thinking about how that is a therapy to process earlier stuff, trauma that
Yeah.
may be linked in some ways to the overfunctioning piece. So, yeah, just to
Yeah.
kind of throw some of my notes out into the podcast.
I love it. I love your notes.
Yeah.
And just to plug real quick, this free Reclaim You portal that is going to go live very soon. Don't have a firm date, but is going to go live very soon. We're going to have the experiential exercises that will hopefully support people in understanding what we mean by going slow. So things as simple, I say simple of the concept, not of actually doing it, just to kind of clarify that, of grounding and orienting and how that level of slowing down to just orient to your space can start to help your nervous system remember, like, oh right, I can be here right now and not caught up in these patterns or the dysregulation that we're so used to operating from. So just to kind of plug that, we'll of course announce when it's going to go live, but there will be some solid videos on there that will be uploaded every month that are going to help you figure out how to do this in real time. So that's going to be supportive and really cool once it's up and ready to go, hopefully by the end of the month.
Yeah, I'm excited for that. That's going to be really
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, Abby has a lot of meditations in there, which is really exciting and cool. So, yeah, I'm excited for people to check that out.
Yeah, just it's always nice to have like a central space for, okay, I'm really feeling it today. Is there like one thing that I can just like ground myself
Yeah.
in? And I think going to a digital place like that is just going to be so nice. Even if it is like
Yeah.
a 2-minute guided meditation.
All right. Well, anything else you feel like you want to add?
Not anything that we've already touched on, I think just, it probably is clear through our conversation. Like I identify with this topic and it's always a work in progress for me
Yeah.
at least. So I guess that's really it. It's just, it takes time. It requires us to like let it take time.
Yeah. Let it take that slowness that we're talking
Yeah.
about. Right. Like it all comes
Yeah.
back around.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for chatting about this. I, of course, relate. I feel like lots of the things that you and I talk about, we both relate to. So I appreciate you as a human in the world. So,
Yeah, you too. Thank you.
thank you. Thank you. All right, everybody. We will be back next week for another episode. And until then, take good care.